One of the great things about gardening is the ability to experiment with little to no downside risk if things go wrong. You can always just start up again and try it once more. And today, that's what we're going to be doing, experimenting, because we're going to be planting horseradish for the first time, something we've never grown before. Well, I don't need a lot of horseradish. I do like its sinus clearing properties. And there are a number of sandwiches and dishes I do like putting horseradish sauce on top of. And I thought, what better way to have that fresh taste than to grow it right in my own garden. The problem with horseradish, though, is it's invasive. They say once you plant it in the ground, you never get rid of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be planting it in buckets, maybe even in one of my whiskey barrels, my half whiskey barrel. And that way it'll contain the root. And if I want to, I can dump the entire bucket or barrel out, get all the root out, and not have to worry about having small pieces left behind that'll end up growing. So this is a new experiment for me. So let's try it out. It takes a long time to grow horseradish. And I actually had wanted to plant this last week, but I couldn't find one. I thought Whole Foods would have one, but they didn't have any. My local supermarket didn't have any. I ended up finding a gourmet farmer's market nearby that had one. As you can see, it's got a lot of sprouts coming out of it. And that was one of the things I looked for when I picked it up, was that it did show that it had some growth in there. So this is not an organically grown horseradish, and there's an easy way to tell, and that's by the PLU code number. This is 4625. That identifies it as horseradish, but the 4 indicates it is probably conventionally grown. If it started with a 9, that would be organically grown produce. So any number, a 5-digit number that begins with the number 9, means it's organically grown. So if you have like a 4 here, a 3 or a 4, that means it's conventionally grown. While I try to grow organically mostly, I'm not a stickler for it. Now, while I had looked at these buds on it and was impressed, and that's why I picked this one up, as I'm opening it now, I see I'm not sure if you can see this, because the light in my greenhouse is super bright, but as you look down here, there's buds all over this. So what that's going to mean is I'm going to be able to cut this up into sections and plant several plants with it. I'm not just going to have to take this whole root and plant it in the ground, but much like we did with our potatoes, we can cut them up, divide them, and get more horseradish than what we started with. Probably wouldn't have hurt to have this sit out for a couple of days before planting it, let the buds kind of like unravel from this shrink wrap cover on it, but I think we'll be fine. So I plan on cutting this head off and then probably dividing that in half and then going down the leg and planting it that way. So I'm going to use my dull as heck knife and cut it open, cut it in half. Oh, well, that smells terrific if you like horseradish. Now, even if it didn't have these buds on it, I was still going to cut it up and plant it. And the reason is, as I said, this is a very invasive root. When you dig it up, you end up leaving roots in the ground. And those are the roots that end up regrowing and spreading out. So they can take over your whole garden if you're not careful. My thinking was that if you leave a root in the ground, it's going to regrow. If I cut up parts of this root and then plant them, they should regrow as well. Seeing how tough it was to actually cut through this thing, I keep knocking off little buds off the side, I can tell you that. So I think that's a good section to plant, and I'm going to be greedy and try and cut this way to get these over here and these over here. This is probably going to be more horseradish than I'm ever going to need. As I said, I like it, I use it. I don't know if I need 5, 6, 7 pieces. I only see one bud on here, so I'm just going to plant this whole one. So 6 pieces will be planted. Now, I'm not planting this into the buckets or the whiskey barrel right away. I'm going to start them off in these 6-inch pots, let them get started, and then once they've sprouted and started growing, I can transplant them out there later. You're supposed to plant them very deep from what I've read, just about 2 inches below the soil. So I think that'll be good there. Now, I do know they've said when you're planting in like a bucket or even in the ground, I guess, you're supposed to plant it at like a 45-degree angle. I don't know how essential that is. I mean, I'm not sure Mother Nature's out there measuring, so I'm going to try and get it as close as possible, but I'm not worrying about angles and stuff like that. Just planting it in the ground. Mid to late March is when you should plant these, and you can buy them from nurseries and other garden centers. I haven't found anything like this at Home Depot or Lowe's or even a local gardening center by me, but probably online orders is where you'll find crowns and plants that you can then, they'll come in a pot like this probably, or maybe in a plastic bag, and then you plant them in the ground. But those are going to be more expensive. This horseradish cost $3.23. And if I can get 6 plants out of it, that'll be terrific. Now we'll water them in. And that's the other thing with horseradish. You want to keep them well watered until the plants are established and you got a good set of leaves on them. And then you'll just need to water them once or twice a week once they're growing. All right. We'll follow the progress of these plants now, and we'll see how they do. And we'll find out together whether or not you can chop up a horseradish like this, plant the roots in the ground, and get a new horseradish plants. Horseradish takes a long time to grow. You plant it mid to late March, and then it's not till October, November, after your first frost comes, that you really start harvesting the horseradish root. So that's another good reason to grow them in buckets or containers of sorts, so that you're not tying up your garden space that'll eventually be overtaken by the horseradish anyway. So because it's such a long growing plant, it is best to grow them in buckets and containers. I'm also going to sow another crop of lettuce. If you saw in last week's update video, the romaine lettuce is coming along really nice. So we want to have another crop ready to go for when that one is picked clean. So I'm going to plant the romaine lettuce 2 cells with seed, not a lot in each. And I decided that instead of the black-seeded Simpson, I'm going to use my Johnny's selected seeds. These are Muir. They're a pelleted seed, and they actually did pretty well last year. I'd never used pelleted seeds before, but I kind of like it. Certainly makes it a heck of a lot easier to handle, considering what the other seeds were. This is just a clay covering on them, and with the water, it ends up dissolving away, and you get the seeds. So I'm going to put 3 seeds in. Cover lightly with the vermiculite, and then water them in. So that's it for planting seeds this week, but there's always more work to do. I've got to pot on a bunch of vegetables that we've got. I think there's the cabbage, there's a few others. The potatoes, they're growing like crazy. They're all sprouting now, most of them. And as I said, I'm going to start bringing them out to the greenhouse and let them start hardening off, because I'd like to start planting them, getting them ready to plant into buckets very soon. My goal is always around St. Patrick's Day, but I don't think it's actually going to happen this year. And that could be because I had actually started growing them out here. And I think the cold weather that we were having at the time kind of like delayed their sprouting. I mean, as I said, they're coming along, and probably by the end of the month at least, they're going to be ready to go. But they're a little bit behind schedule, and I would like to have been a little bit further along with their growth. but that's okay. There's really no rush, just my own impatience. So, but I am going to start bringing them out here to begin hardening them off. Actually start bringing out a lot of the plants out here to harden them off. The lettuce, for example, that's been growing, that's ready to be brought out, because next week they'll probably be transplanted into the garden, or actually into their buckets, so they'll be planted and grown outdoors. So, a lot going on. If you'd like to see what we were doing last week in the garden, check out this video right here. And then subscribe and hit that notification bell. And that way you'll be able to follow along on the progress of all of our vegetables as we try to grow a supermarket in our own backyard. Okay, thanks for watching. And I can't resist showing, but the horseradish that we just planted yesterday is already breaking through the soil. So horseradish looks like it's going to be off to a good start. Now this is probably the one with the big root that had a lot of sprouts on it, so it was going to break through before others, and these other ones will probably take a little bit longer. But it's good to see one day in and the plants are already starting to sprout.